Hello, everyone. My name is Monica Ricosi. I'd like to welcome you to the Fashion and Sustainability Summit, the 2020 series. This is a collaboration of Fashion Dex and LIM College. The summit is sponsored by Eco-Life Yarns, as well as Kendor Textiles Limited and the Accessories Council. This is week 7. We are about to have a conversation on sustainability in fashion at Cotopaxi, H&M, and Eileen Fisher. Today's speakers are Amy Hall of Eileen Fisher, Abigail Kammerzell of H&M, and Annie Agle of Cotopaxi. The lead moderator today is Sabrina Moscola of Ballet Group. Co-moderators are Riley Bott of LIM College and Rebecca Margolis of Fashion Dex. And with that being said, I would like to turn the series over to our lead moderator. Sabrina, would you please unmute yourself and take it away?
Hi everyone, I'm Sabrina Moscola. I am the Director of Product Management at Ballet Group. I'm also an LIM College alum. Really excited to be here with everyone today. I think this is going to be a really great panel. I'm sure I'm biased, but I think I got some really great speakers today. So I am here with Abigail, Amy, and Annie. I will turn it over to each of them to give a little brief bio of themselves. Abigail, would you like to go first?
Hi everyone, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to take part in this. I am the sustainability manager for H&M US, so that means I oversee sustainability for all of H&M's US operations. At H&M, like at many other companies, sustainability for us involves the planet side of things, but also the people. So not only do I oversee the environmental impact of our business at large here in the United States, but I'm also responsible for things like community events and making sure that everywhere that we operate is healthy, both from an environmental and a person perspective.
Thank you. Amy, would you like to go next?
Sure, thank you very much, and hi everybody. I'm the Vice President of Social Consciousness at Eileen Fisher, where I've been for 27 years, and I lead the both the environmental side and the human rights side, and also our philanthropy. And that relates to our own processes and practices, as well as our supply chain and our external influence as a business. I led the company through our Vision 2020 work, and now leading us into our Horizon 2030 work with our focus on regenerative ag and circularity.
Thank you. And last but not least, Annie.
I'm Annie. I'm the Director of Impact and Brand at Cotopaxi. I oversee all of our corporate social responsibility, which entails leading our foundation and our grant giving program, making sure that we are adhering to very strict human rights and sustainability due diligence across our supply chain and sourcing initiatives, as well as overseeing anything that really touches corporate impact. So yeah, it's been a great role for me, and I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. We will jump right into it. I'm really excited to speak with each of you today. I think we can learn so much because you're each representing such diverse brands. We have more niche, we have mass, elevated. So based on each of your business models, I'd love to hear a bit about how you approach sustainability.
I'm happy to jump in. I'd say Cotopaxi in general, we were founded legally as a benefit corporation, which I think is, for all of you young entrepreneurs out there, I think it's a really important kind of path to consider when moving forward with your own ideas or considering what businesses to join. Obviously, publicly traded companies, and I know H&M has done some really great work around this, but there's usually a morally conflicting set of interests around whether or not you're promoting people or planet, or whether or not you're promoting profitability for your shareholders. And so our legal designation really allows us to prioritize people and planet first, which really helps us ingrain aspects of sustainability and human rights into every aspect of our decision making, and that doesn't become a conflict of interest with our profitability. And historically, we've given as much away in profits as we possibly could to our efforts around poverty alleviation. And that includes a lot of sustainable sourcing, which, you know, both human and environmental side are very important to us, similar to Eileen Fisher. So that's a little bit about how we're sort of founded. And then similar to Eileen Fisher, we also did the B Corp assessment. So we're both legally a designated benefit corporation as well as a B Corp assessed company.
So jumping off of Annie, everything she said is true about Eileen Fisher, also a benefit corp and a B corporation. And the way I think about our approach to sustainability, it really starts with design. You know, we design into the product the good stuff as much as we can. That means our fiber, the best fiber, the chemistry, water use, land management, all of those things are considered. Animal welfare at the beginning, through our manufacturing processes, where we start thinking more about the human side, but as well as the environmental side in our supply chain. All the way to consumers, and how does the consumer have to care for the product, and will the product last a long time, and when it's done being used, will the consumer, we convince the consumer to bring it back to us so we can enter it into our Renew product lifecycle work.
All right. So obviously H&M is coming at sustainability and sort of coming at our business model a little bit differently. But really from our first day in 1947, our business has been all about making fashion and the joy of fashion accessible to everyone, and really democratizing what had previously only been available to sort of the privileged few. Obviously today, the world looks very different from 1947, but we still want to make fashion accessible and enjoyable for all. But given what the world is like now, the environmental pressures, the social pressures that face our planet, we really have had to look at our business and change how are we making fashion accessible. And we really believe that to make fashion accessible and to say democratizing it and making it available to everyone, we also have to make it something that people feel that they can buy from H&M and still be in line with their ethics and their morals. So we really are looking at the resources that we use, how we can really work on reuse of resources. Our goal is only to use sustainable materials by 2030, and we really think that lessening the dependence on virgin materials is really how you're going to continue to drive a business. Looking at how we work with people, how the expectations we set with our suppliers. We're very fortunate that being, a business that we operate on scale, we have really long-term relationships with our suppliers. So we can really influence these relationships to make sure that the suppliers that we use are also working to become more sustainable, and it makes sense from a financial perspective for them to invest in sustainability. So not only is it benefiting H&M, but also all the other brands that then are using that suppliers, they can take advantage of the sustainable ways of working. We also, we really communicate with our customers about sustainability. We want them to understand how they're part of the story of sustainability, how they can make the most informed choices, and ultimately how they can see being sustainable and making sustainable choices. These are the most desirable ones, and these are the most attractive choices. So really, it's about using our influence to support positive transformation in the fashion industry at large, driving innovation. This is something that's really important to H&M, is driving innovation throughout the entire fashion industry. Collaborating with others, because even though we might be experts at selling shirts and pants, there are other experts out there who are really working on really exciting things around a sustainable fashion industry. Pushing for greater transparency and rewarding sustainable actions, both for others in the fashion industry, but also for our consumers, really rewarding those sustainable actions. So we're really changing the way we're doing business to become fully climate positive and fully circular throughout our entire value chain. Making the most of resources, cutting carbon emissions, and really turning what was previously seen as waste into new resources. So, we want to be part of a fashion industry that's providing fair jobs, providing equal treatment for everyone, respecting human rights, part of inclusion and diversity throughout our entire supply chain, and really calling on others in the industry to do the same.
And Abigail, you touched a little bit on costing. So I wanted to talk about that. When a brand first starts using sustainable materials, because the whole world is not doing this yet, it can end up, increasing cost, decreasing margin. So when we're in an organization and we're talking to the people whose job functions really focus on the bottom line. How do we convey that using sustainable materials or putting sustainable practices into place will end up, saving money at some point over the long run?
I mean, for us, I think it's sort of we're very fortunate that, the foundation of our business and how we're doing things is really looking at long-term planning and long-term relationships. And yes, sometimes you might have to sacrifice, profit in the very short term, but I'm not above sort of an emotional appeal to these people as well. But it always helps, of course, you need to have the facts to back it up. There are people whose whole job is to really look at the costs. But it's also, for us, it was really looking at our biggest costs also have the biggest environmental impact. So if we're reducing our dependence on virgin materials, if we're reducing the water we use, if we aren't using harmful chemicals, so then we don't have to make sure that we're removing those from the water supply, it really does lead to fewer costs down the line. And I think it's all about, we're talking about sustainability. For us, it's really looking at, if we want to be a sustainable business long term, we need to have a planet in order to be a business on and be part of. But I think it is really about showing the effectiveness of long-term relationships and long-term goals when you're planning and looking at that, and not just short-term costs. We're very fortunate that as a Swedish company, we're sort of built on foundation for respect for the environment, and people who work on who are on our board understand this. So I understand I am in a very fortunate position. Also, I would say don't undervalue the role of consumers when looking at costs and when looking at profit. I think people are interested and want to know the cool things that a brand is doing in sustainability. And even if a sustainable action isn't a cost saver, I think you can prove that you're more than making up for it in the value added by being a sustainable brand. And that really, we see how the future is going, and we see, looking historically at our sustainable collections and sustainable things that we're doing, looking forward, if we continue to do that, we know that that brings more people to the brand.
I think for us at Cotopaxi, it comes from leading from motivation before tactics. I think that everyone in our merchandising and product departments understands the cost of fair labor. And I think we sort of reverse engineer first from understanding our human rights obligations, and not just from a risk mitigation or a reputation kind of saving tactic, but truly wanting to have a positive influence on everyone who touches our products. And so we really adhere to the ethical trading initiatives, much more holistic sense of due diligence rather than what's been termed as more cosmetic compliance. And so I think by taking the true costs of upholding dignity and human rights and proper sustainability accounting first, that needs to be part of your costing. You need to be taking into account human rights and natural capital inputs when you're pricing an item. And if you're not doing that, then you're not truly costing an item correctly. And so I think educating your merchandising community, both internally and then through your board, about how you're accounting for due diligence, proper due diligence at every level of decision making is really important. And then explaining to your consumer how you price your items. At Cotopaxi, we try to have as narrow of a margin as possible, and we want to be profitable so that we can continue to sustainably alleviate poverty, so that we can drive change through our supply chain and go from there. And I would also say that there are a lot of opportunities around materials. We design to eliminate waste whenever possible. And so, we've worked with suppliers. Typically, the only route really to regain cost of unusable material, whether it's virgin at the mill level or damaged product, has been you have to show proof of destruction, which means that a lot of companies, a lot of suppliers have to incinerate materials at regular intervals. And so we've really tried to design to eliminate waste. And so a lot of our suppliers, we will buy fabrics from Patagonia, from Camelback, from different outdoor brands, and that's what we use to make our primary backpack line. Same with other suppliers. When we actually started treating suppliers as equals rather than this kind of top-down supply chain leader approach, that a lot of multinational enterprises are using and just tried to be more collaborative, you know, they really wanted to decrease their waste. They're as invested, if not more so, in trying to be sustainable because they have to live with the outcomes of bad production much more than we do in developed countries. And so, you know, we've worked really hand in hand with suppliers to use waste to design. And I think as a smaller, you know, medium-sized enterprise and a B Corp, it's something we can pilot that other bigger companies, say like an H&M, can then build on and use us as a case study for, say, making a margin appropriate item, but that's much more circular in design than typical virgin products. And I know, Amy, I fangirl on Eileen Fisher all the time, by the way. They are doing this amazing, I would actually love to hear about recreating whole new products from previous products. I mean, they have done so much. And, you know, I feel like we think of sustainability as like this recent thing. They have been doing it forever. I love their company so much, and Amy's done amazing work. So just like girl crush over here.
Thank you, Annie. Gosh, I should hire you as my personal agent. You know, I wasn't going to actually answer the question because I figured you kind of covered everything between the two of you. I would say that there are a couple things that jump into mind for me. One is one tactic we took as a company early on when we were starting to purchase or invest in organic, just to pick one stream of sustainability, organic fiber. It was typically more expensive than conventional fibers. So what we did was we looked across all of the whole array of all of our products for a season. And we said, where do we have the biggest margin between what we're paying for it and what we're able to sell it for? And we borrowed from that margin and to pay for the difference in price for our organic fiber. And that's how we got into organic. And then once that new fiber was on the line, it became part of our standard offering and we were selling it just like anything else. And then we would do the same thing for the next fiber. And after a while, we didn't have to do that anymore because it became kind of a built-in muscle reflex. And we were selling the product. And if we look now at our sales numbers, we see that typically, you know, out of our top 10 highest volume highest selling products, usually 6 to 7 of them are made out of so-called sustainable or eco materials as we rank them inside. So that's really, you know, good data for us. And gosh, you know, Annie, since you said it, I have this really cool backpack. I just got it the other day and it's made out of reclaimed denim from our taken back clothing, and it's been felted. It's very heavy and thick. And this is, you know, made out of our Waste No More, through our Waste No More brand, I guess you might call it. But it starts with our Renew clothing take back process. We get the clothes back and we sort of channel it into different streams. And this is one thing that we can do with it, is make this really cool kind of product.
Annie, I love that you brought up that we all think about sustainability as this new thing, but there are brands who have been doing it for a while, like Eileen Fisher. So the next question I'll pass to Amy. What do you wish you knew when you first started implementing sustainable practices?
So there's two things I wish I knew. And one is I really wish I knew change management, because I always tell people sustainability is all about human behavior. We got ourselves into this mess. We have to get ourselves out of this mess. It's up to us to make the right choices and to convince our colleagues, our business partners, our customers, the policymakers, et cetera, to make the right choices and to change practices for the better. And each one of those choice points requires a specialized conversation and an interaction. And if I had been better at, you know, like debate club or something like that in school, I think it would have really served me well here. The other thing I wish I knew was systems thinking and systems mapping. I mean, it goes without saying everything is connected. I think we understand that intuitively, but really understanding what goes into true systems mapping, and then, you know, how do you use that to drive change in a process to really engage everybody in an organization around what has to happen. It's not just about the designers. It's not just about, you know, people in each of these roles. Those two things together really work well, and I think accelerate change.
If there is anyone else who wants to jump in on that, feel free.
I mean, can I say we wish we knew the future, because I think we're learning new stuff about sustainability every single day. And, you know, both learning about the solutions to sustainability, but really I think we're learning every day, understanding how important it is to integrate, you know, as was mentioned, into every part of your business. And we start our sustainability starts with our designers. It starts with designing with sustainable materials and designing to reduce waste and to make sure that we're really, you know, designing in a conscious and smart way, and then throughout the entire business. But I think really, you know, for us, one of the things that I think, had we done this earlier, it would have been better is setting really ambitious goals as a company. Earlier, we set goals, but it's really, really being ambitious, and then also incorporating consumers into your sustainability journey early. Even if you're not perfect, which we are not perfect, but we're on a journey, really bring your customers and your consumers into and taking them along on the journey and understanding where you're at, where you need to be, and all traveling that journey together. I think that that's something we could have done earlier. And I think it would have, you know, someone starting a business, you know this already to do it. So I think you're at an advantage already.
I think one thing I wish I'd done earlier in my career is learn the art of how to effectively ask for help. And I think there is a sense, especially as a consumer brand in the West, that you're supposed to have the answers and take the answers down your value chain. That's the very typical supply chain management approach that was, you know, pushed in the post-Bretton Woods era in the 50s and 60s, when sustainability first became a topic, and you get concepts of triple bottom line and donut economics and these kind of alternative economic models. But I don't think that was drilled into me by any of my early mentors, that some of the best solutions might come from suppliers or workers themselves. And sitting in my role today, really understanding the power of things like collective bargaining and really promoting that, of having access to workers and helping them have a voice. And not just doing that because it's part of your human rights due diligence, but because we all know that our biggest impacts in terms of human rights and sustainability happen upstream in the supply chain. And for example, like if you're buying a conventional cotton t-shirt, chances are, statistically, and this has been modeled, at some point along that supply chain, there was child labor, there was forced labor. And especially for COVID, we know that there are at least 21 million persons in forced labor. You know, human trafficking does not look like what it did during the Soviet Cold War era. It's much more a result of debt bondage, of coercion. There's a lot of money involved typically. And I wish I'd truly appreciated that you can really only resolve those problems by talking to those humans themselves, and to think that you can develop an appropriate, comprehensive solution for sustainability without having or asking for help or advice all the way upstream. It's not going to be a true solution. And so I wish I'd had the kind of confidence to be more humble. I think this is an all-female panel, and I think especially there is this sense of like, you can't really ask too many questions. You have to have it all figured out, especially when you're on a brand and a consumer-driven brand. You know, chances are you're going to be presenting to boards and executives, and you're already sort of seen as like the tree hugger person or whatever. And I think it's important to know when to push back and use what authority you have to say, hey, we don't know. We can't just like say this is going to be a great idea. We're going to create all of these goals in our own silo of our for-profit business model in America and think that we're going to be able to magically help workers without getting their input. So that's what I wish I'd known.
I'm thinking about the data and who is really jumping on as a consumer to sustainable brands. And it shows that it's the younger generations. So my question is, how do you communicate that emotional buy-in to consumers outside of that demographic?
Okay, I guess this one is really for me, because consumer is definitely outside of that demographic for the most part. You know, one thing that my team, we've been talking about for years, is the fact that it's really hard to create an emotional story, to create that emotional connection around environmental sustainability issues. We have tried so many different things, and really what the people in our customer base most are interested in is human issues. And so those are the questions we get most often, and it's easier to tell a compelling story in my view and in our experience when it connects to people. Sometimes when it connects to an animal also. And it's possible to create an environmental story around its impact on people, for sure. That was true when we were first, early on in the days, learning the difference between conventional cotton and organic cotton, for example, and what conventional cotton farming will do to a person's health, people in the field, et cetera. But it's, anyway, still today, I think we have much more effective storytelling around the human condition in our supply chain. And that's where we get the most uptake. So what can I tell you? That's what people are interested in, and at least outside of that demographic.
I would say, actually, I know we're seen as a very millennial Gen Z brand, but we actually have a huge variety of generational buy-in, and our fastest growing demographic has been the 45 to 60-year-old range. And we know one reason for this has nothing to do with sustainability. One is like every 80s kid is like, 80s colors are back, yes! And like they just love our colorways, which is great. But I think that generation is extremely concerned about what they're leaving behind for future generations. And I think they are looking for ways to participate in a more ethical economy. They're just never marketed to. I think there is a lot of ageism across marketing, and what we've realized is like things like LinkedIn, more human-based stories, like Amy is saying, are important. More long-form content. What they want in a piece is very different. And I think that group should be marketed for more and designed for more. And don't assume that you know that demographic or its needs. I think its needs are changing. I think there's actually a lot more evolution in the boomer generation than we give it credit for.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, Annie, you hit it on the head when you say, who are you doing it for? You're leaving a legacy. And that's what we really see. You know, H&M is for everyone, and, you know, our demographic generally skews younger, but it's really, you know, one of our biggest demographics, and our top shoppers are moms. And they're really here, they're nurturing and they're creating a future for their kids. And it's really is about that human connection, and no one is an island. And I think that's something we all depend on each other. And it is really adding that human element to the sustainability story, and really making sure that you're just talking about the people, because that's really what it all boils down to anyway. And I think that that's something that if you leave out, you know, if you leave out people who aren't Gen Z, who aren't younger millennials, you know, you're missing a huge demographic of people who do care. It's just we need to talk to them.
I love that everyone jumped on that question and that conversation. In general, fashion is not viewed as a sustainable industry. We talked a little bit about this with, you know, buyback and repurpose type programs. But how do we promote less consumption while keeping fashion alive and really staying profitable? Is it the buyback programs? Is it repurposing? What do you think is most important?
If I can just jump in briefly here, one is the model. I think the fewer products you can produce, so we try to keep a very narrow line. We don't, you know, when we add a product to a line, it's done with a lot of deliberation. There's a lot of team weigh-in, and it has to have a functional purpose. We feel at Cotopaxi that we want that piece of clothing to really facilitate the kind of meaningful lives we'd love to see our consumers live. And so it's a product that's outdoorsy, but you're not going to climb Everest with, but hopefully you're out there having an adventure. You're engaging actively in your community, and you're kind of signaling that you're a fun and a colorful person, but that you have to think very deliberately about adding a product. You're not just adding a product to add a product. You're not just trying to be on trend. The reason we are as colorful as we are is that we were designing from scraps. And so that's what was left, and so we decided, well, we might as well make anti-basic a kind of thing, but that's never going to be like a trend for us. That's who we are. Take it or leave it. And I think there is that kind of sense of sticking to your values, not just when it's easy and you're kind of on trend, but even when you're not, and maybe tinkering with the designs to make sure it's a good fit. But I know Eileen Fisher does a great job of this too. Like, is this a product that's going to last very long? That's why we have a very long and generous warranty. We want people to return or to repair, and offering our repairs programs. So I think it's really being deliberate about how you're adding products and when and why, and then really providing those repair and reuse options, both at the beginning of the life cycle and at the end of the life cycle.
I would add that I agree with everything, that at this moment in time, as we're coming through the pandemic, many of us, many apparel companies are being forced to reassess kind of their size, their purpose, what aspects of their products are really needed, what do their customers actually need. We've all discovered that we need a lot of tops and not so many bottoms right now. So I think, so this conversation for us at Eileen Fisher, which started actually years ago, where we started asking ourselves the question, how big is too big? And what's the right amount of profitability? We are now bringing those questions back in for ourselves, because we are being forced to downsize as a company, because we aren't selling as much. But it's actually, we're seeing this as an opportunity to finally step into, to answer that question that we've been asking ourselves for so many years, that actually the world doesn't need us to be big. The world needs us to create a certain amount of product that is thoughtfully created, thoughtfully designed, that our customers actually need, and not too much of it. And then how are we going to ramp up and really lean into the reuse piece and the upcycling piece, and also services. To Annie's point, there are other ways to serve the needs of our customers and to make money. So, and I'll just add that, longevity and is really important to us. And we have for a long time always said to our customers, only buy what you love. And we really mean that. We've talked people out of buying things in our stores because we could just sense that maybe their heart wasn't in it. And we want people to really love what they buy, hold on to it for a very long time, take good care of it, invest in it, and treat it like an investment rather than something you're going to buy and wear for a couple months and discard. So all of those things are really coming to life for us right now.
I think, for H&M, given our business model, it's sort of, to everything that you both said, fashion should be fun, and it's a form of artistic self-expression. And we believe that fashion should be accessible to everyone, and you shouldn't have to have a lot of money to dress your personality and to shop ethically. And ultimately, the most sustainable clothes are the ones that you love. They're the ones that you take care of. They're the ones that you keep in your wardrobe season after season. And that's something, we're really trying to promote. I know that seems odd for us to say, but that is something that we're trying to promote, is really being conscious about the consumerism, and something that H&M is really excited about and has been investing in and is ramping up is new business models and new business practices, rental, secondhand, re-commerce, and really looking at extended producer responsibility. Like, we believe that we're fully responsible for the entire life cycle of a garment, and making sure that nothing ever ends up in the landfill. So we want our consumers, as much as they're holding themselves accountable for their sustainable practices, to also hold us as a business accountable, and really finding solutions at scale. And that's something we do through our Global Change Awards, which is, an early stage innovation program, accelerator program, really looking at how can we change the fashion industry to be sustainable. And also looking at things, reducing dependency on virgin materials. So for us, it's really about making sure that we as a business are looking at new ways to serve our customers, while being as sustainable as possible.
How has technology played a role in putting sustainability into your business? And do you think that will change post-COVID?
I'd say we're a very tech-centered organization. You know, unlike a lot of other outdoor brands, we started as a digitally native brand. Both of our co-founders came out from Wharton, and I'd say we're kind of a startup first and an outdoor clothing company second. And I'd say that data for me is absolutely critical. Information systems, especially, we know that one of the biggest impacts you can have to promote and drive human rights due diligence is actually just give a much longer product demand time. We know that when we're rushing orders from suppliers, that's when the subcontracting happens. That's when you get people off books and you get a lot of intermediaries hiring workers who don't end up getting kind of work. That's where a lot of the issues in tier 2 and tier 3 of supply chains, meaning the milling and raw materials, happens. So one thing we've really worked hard at, both from a business standpoint, but also from an impact standpoint, and especially in the era of COVID, is just increasing lead times, being extremely focused on knowing exactly what demand is and not overproducing or underproducing. And we've piloted a lot of, say, pre-orders. So with our mask program, with different products that we don't know how well they're going to do and we don't know how to buy into it, we do pre-order programs. It's a great way of getting a very exact sense of where the customer engagement for that product might be. It gives us more lead times with suppliers because that customer has already had its expectations set that this is not going to be delivered to your doorstep tomorrow. It's still having to be created. But then we can make really data-based decisions. And one of the interesting things that came out of the International Label Organization's survey of suppliers and workers in the time of COVID was saying that the number one thing that they wish brands in the fashion sector would improve would be their purchase order programs. Their planning, that the rush order is where they were just killing their suppliers and really forcing suppliers to engage in labor abuses. Suppliers weren't given a chance. And so that's where I think we try to make very data-based decisions, especially around demand. And it's really helped us negotiate the demand shock that's kind of killed a lot of other apparel companies during COVID, and hopefully made us a much better partner for our suppliers. So that's one way we've used data and technology.
Yeah, I think, we have integrated AI into how our buyers and how our merchandisers work. So it is really about how are your models predicting exactly how much to produce, where to ship it to, so you're not overproducing. I think that's something that's really huge, and something over the last about 3 years, H&M has really been working on integrating into our entire business practices, is the right amount of product in the right places at the right time, and really making sure that we are being smart. And that's not just a sustainability thing, that's also very cost effective. So that's another way that, when you're answering to people who are looking at the numbers, these practices are more sustainable and they're helping the bottom line. And sort of post-COVID, one of the things that I'm most excited about is actually our programs that we're working with, reskilling workers in our supply chain to support sustainable business practices, especially when you're looking at garment recycling, especially when you're looking at things like garment remake. Because one of the things that's really important to us is workers within the supply chain can't be left behind when you're talking about sustainability. It's your responsibility as a producer to bring them with you. And what does that look like for your business? So we're very excited about that sort of post-COVID world.
I agree with both of you. And I know another thing that's been talked about, and I think it will start being implemented more post-COVID, is virtual sampling to cut down on sending samples back and forth. So I just wanted to add that as another point as well. I think we have quite a few questions coming in.
So I'm a merchandising and sustainability student at LIM, and I'm super excited to be here. Travis, I did see that you raised your hand, so if you have a question, I would like to give you the chance to ask that if you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have the hand icon, so I had to kind of raise my hand physically. So I have a question. So we talked a lot about producing less and designing less, but a lot of the waste goes in the development process. So for instance, a business might develop 300 styles, but then they only produce 80. So we haven't discussed how businesses are addressing, for instance, when during the editing process, how are businesses addressing sustainability when it comes down to development?
I mean, for us, we have our lab, which is really helping us to cut down, exactly like you said, cut down on the number of styles and samples that you're producing in the beginning. We're not perfect. I still think that we have a long way to go to ensure that we are being, as waste conscious as we can be. But this also goes along to how I spoke about using AI, and that's using AI throughout our entire processes. So we can really make sure that we are being as smart as possible. Our design program, and when our designers are working on the samples, we actually do have incentives for them to design using things like materials that we've already used in our supply chain. So fabric that we already have, different cuts that we already have. So we already have the pattern, so we know it's a pattern that works, so we don't have to go back and forth as much. So we have integrated into sort of our new design guidelines that we launched this year, making sure that we're designing in the most sustainable way. I'm not going to lie to you, we still have a ways to go because obviously, producing at such a high volume, but there is, I think it's integrating all of that into the initial design process and understanding what you want to get out of it first.
Yeah, I'm not sure how applicable this particular question is to us because we had 10 products this year. I mean, it's pretty small. And typically we're working with waste to begin with, but I will say we have a donate, never destroy policy. And all of our samples are either given to our employees all around, our distribution center. We try to treat everyone like an equal. And we also really try to give all of those samples away. So we've worked with our amazing logistics and shipping provider, Flexport, who typically in the past, to get insurance claims back, you actually had to show proof of destruction. I think I mentioned that. But as a result of that, we donate. We have a policy across our entire company that it has to be donated. And we also want to make sure that we're not just plopping down a ton of product on a nonprofit or one area where you're actually just shoving your responsibility of waste on the person you're donating it, and then they have to go find a landfill to put it in. So we really we have a very specific seeding program for any sample, which is very, very small, but in the event of, say, a shipping container of products that's been damaged, we really work to try to spread the love around very specifically to people in the Americas. We always do our donation in the Americas, mostly Latin and South America, where we can give those products away to people who could use them.
That was all really awesome. That was a really good question, Travis. But I just wanted to, I have kind of a broad question, but one of my favorite quotes is that there's room for everyone at the table, which is why I was really excited for this panel, because we have Eileen Fisher, more classic pieces, very timeless, and then Cotopaxi, very lifestyle, and H&M, which gears more towards the more fashion accessibility scene. And so it's really exciting to see that people from all different areas of the industry are kind of working in the same direction. And that being said, we've been getting a lot of very H&M specific questions, but I kind of want to open it up to everyone. And that would be, what is something that you wish you could broadcast to your consumer, to other companies, that is harder to share? I know that Sabrina kind of asked a question in relation to greenwashing, but I know that sometimes you may have had a big accomplishment, a big stride, but there's no way to really communicate that with the consumer without sounding like you're bragging or trying to oversell it. So if there's any recent accomplishments that you've made or anything that you're working on right now that you have wished that you had the opportunity to share, yeah, that can be for anyone.
I mean, understandably that there's a lot of questions specifically to H&M, given our business model. I think that is understandable. I mean, something for us is We are, I would say, cautious, as you said, about communicating what's happening with sustainability for a plethora of reasons, but it's really, you know, one, I never want to be seen as greenwashing. I think that that's, you can see what H&M is, and if we shout from the rooftops that we're a perfect business and we're fully sustainable, I think everyone's going to see that that's not true. But we are working very, very diligently and very hard, and I wouldn't work for this company if I didn't believe in the mission. You know, we have no conventional cotton in our supply chain. We don't use conventional cotton, you know, and that's our biggest fiber that we do. And we're, you know, one of the world's largest consumers of recycled, of organic, and of BCI cotton. And so it's really important, I think, you know, the information is out there, but we don't spread it. And we're working, you know, our next goal that we're working on is only having compostable, recyclable, or reusable plastic throughout our entire supply chain. So it's really, you know, we're taking these steps that we don't necessarily talk about. They're not sexy. They're just the steps that you need to do to be an ethical business. And so we don't really discuss them. And especially, you know, here in the United States, when you're talking about, you know, supply chain and labor and workers, I think it's so complicated that often it's hard to communicate. So this is something that also we are really working on, and I think Annie's spoken at length about this, is having to have, you know, we have a full department that works just on human rights and really works specifically in our supply chain. You know, at H&M, we have over 300 people who work purely in sustainability. So there's people like me who, you know, have a country responsibility, and that's about 75 of us. But then, you know, there's people who have department responsibilities in sustainability, and we have a huge presence in our production markets for the sustainability, both from an environmental side, also from a human side. So I think, you know, that's things that I'm really excited about. And I'm really excited that our goal is to be fully circular and climate positive and taking real steps and investing the money. And I think that's, you know, when you're looking at a brand, look at where they're investing and how they're spending their money and what they're doing. When you talk about innovation, for us, our innovation is all around becoming more sustainable and becoming then fully sustainable and fully circular.
That's great to hear. I think everyone else here had no idea about everything that's happening. And so that's really exciting to hear. Annie or Amy, I don't know if you had anything to add to that, but now is your chance.
I think you should go, Amy.
You know, I just would say that what's always really hard about communicating anything related to sustainability is that we're always in the gray. It's very gray. Very little of this is black or white. And so to make any kind of claim, kind of, you know, to what Abigail was talking about, it's very, very tricky. And we never want to be caught making an unsubstantiated claim. We never want to be caught over, you know, exaggerating something. And so as a result, we may tend to under talk about ourselves. And the more we're doing this work, the more we learn about what's really going on in the world. And I'll, you know, an example is we also pretty much only use organic cotton. There's 1% of our cotton is conventional, and that's because it shows up in some blends that we purchase or a trim or something. And we have now really started to understand that organic cotton, there's a lot of problems with it. And yet we continue to label things organic because they do come with the certification. But there's fraud in certifications, there's, you know, cross-contamination in the fields, there's duplication in the record keeping, you know, across various kinds of organic systems. A field could get, you know, certified by more than one system and then get claimed more than once, and it's very tricky, and we're really uncomfortable now with some of the things that we currently are, you know, where we have been claiming. And I think, you know, you may see more communication about that going forward. But my point about all of this is that you know, almost everything you read really has to be taken with a grain of salt, and you have to really do your due diligence and try to understand for yourself as a consumer what really means the most to you, what matters most to you, and what are the things you're going to stick to, and what are you going to be a little more compromising on, and try to understand the intent of the company and what they're really trying to do, and are they actually, you know, genuine about that intent. That's kind of where we are right now and how we're thinking about all of this.
Yeah, I think it's hard. I certainly struggle with this as well. And I think it's very hard to market complexity, but that is something that I've spoken to a lot about. You know, cause marketing is kind of dubious. How can we use marketing more as an educational piece? And part of that is admitting what you don't know about what you don't know within your supply chain. And there's always a huge element. And for us as a small to medium-sized enterprise, right, we own such a small portion, or are even responsible for such a small portion of any given supplier's activities. It's very confusing for us to know, well, what's our moral obligation to, you know, workers who are not necessarily working on our products, but maybe in an accompanying facility. And even, you know, reducing plastics. Well, that puts a lot of burden, and not all natural replacements are as good. And well, even if we use some recycled blend, anything that's blended and then becomes a clothing can never be recycled. You know, that's an interesting thing to know. If you're working with blended anything, that clothing item can never be recycled. Similar to organic, what does organic mean? Different pesticides use mean very different things. There are different cultural ways of raising cotton. It just is very complicated. And even, you know, switching from, say, single-use plastic water bottles to repurposed water bottle, well, it depends how that water bottle was made, because you're working with, you know, a lot of very challenging metal alloys, and sometimes, you know, one life cycle analysis of your typical reusable water bottle, if that's not sustainably made, you're going to have to use that thing like 4 million times before it becomes more sustainable than just having recycled plastic water bottles. And so I think getting your consumers to understand how complicated this are, and trying to shift them maybe away from this very kind of Western sense of righteousness that sometimes we have around sustainability. And like, it's amazing to have H&M on that. Obviously the impact they can have is so different than what Cotopaxi can have. And we're all in this together. And I think if you're a consumer in the West, you've played your part too, just like we have as companies. And so having that healthy degree of humility wherever you are on the consumer side, whether you're a company or a customer, that I think is the biggest thing, just having that sense of humility of just being like, wow, we all need to be doing better.
That was amazing, all three of you. Like, I just took so many notes. But thank you all for answering that. I know that was kind of a very bulk question, but I did want to pass it to Rebecca really quick to ask a few of the questions from the chat box, or the Q&A box, mate.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca. Like Riley said, I'm just going to get right into it because I know we're a little bit tight on time. But one of the questions I'd like to ask first is mainly for everyone. We've kind of talked about waste and circularity in terms of the supply chain. Do you think that customers are ready for this kind of shift in the fashion industry? For example, fewer trends, fewer drops, overall just the kind of shift we're seeing in the industry. Do you think people are responding? And if so, how?
All I was going to say is, like, we're living proof that they are. We were founded 5 years ago. Our growth has been spectacular. And I really credit our success, one, to responsible investors taking a chance on us, and consumers. They're part of our company, really, and that we've done well, that we're still in business, is living proof for that.
Yeah, and I was also going to say, yes, consumers have too many choices now, and we hear that just for our own product. When people come into our stores, they're confused, and that's just our own brand. So, you know, we are reducing the number of SKUs we offer by a huge number, and really trying to focus on what do consumers really need? What do our customers really need from us? What's going to be most meaningful to them? What's going to serve them, you know, for the next few years going forward, and also really engage them increasingly in our take back program.
Yeah, I think, what you said about encouraging consumers to be part of a take back program, or, I've mentioned garment recycling, and Annie, you said, blended fibers, you can't recycle them. And that's something that H&M is actually really heavily investing in and working with. And we have our partnership with the Hong Kong Research Institute of Textiles. So it's really looking at, first from the consumer and how much you're buying, and do you love the clothes that you're buying, and do you love what you have? Because that's most important, loving what you have, because then you'll take care of it. But then when you're done with something, how are you disposing of it? Because fashion isn't disposable, and I think that mindset, especially H&M, fashion isn't disposable. It can always be given a new life in some way. So we have our garment recycling program, but then it's also, like you said, how are you breaking out like a poly cotton blend? How are you breaking that down? How are you, turning that into a new garment? So we do have our garment to garment machine, which really it can take poly cotton blends, unmix the fibers basically, and then you get a cellulose powder as waste, and then the polyester can be reformed into something new. Again, this is not a perfect solution, but it's really about looking at what are the next steps and then involving your customers in it, because I think that customers are hungry for this. They want to know more about what's going on. They want to shop, they want to have the fun of fashion, but still shopping ethically and shopping so that they'll have an earth to look at, because it's not just us that are looking at the future. I think everyone's really looking at the future, and the writing's on the wall. We see if we continue as we have been. So it's really involving our customers in every step from buying to how they get rid of it when they want something new.
Awesome, thank you. So for the last question, I would like to kind of end on a positive note. This topic can obviously be heavy and all of that, but basically my question is from a brand perspective, what are future goals for truly achieving this closed loop system of design, manufacture, and reuse? So do your brands have anything in the works that are exciting in terms of more circularity, less waste, all of that?
Well, we've been taking our clothes back since 2009. We've collected about 1.5 million garments, which is really just a drop in the bucket compared to what we've made historically over that time period. And we resell half of that. We clean and resell half of that at a significantly reduced price. And then we turn the other half into fabric and garments, or fabric and products like the backpack I showed you. And we do send some of the unusable fabric from those garments to some of our supply chain partners who work with us to develop new fabrics out of them. We haven't gotten to the point where we can kind of, magically dissolve a fabric and, break it down chemically and turn it into something new. Most of our fabrics have a little bit of Lycra in them because we're famous for our fit and stretch. And so that has caused a delay in our ability to kind of achieve the final stage, which is to have that full circularity fiber to fiber. But I will also say that it isn't our only goal to be fully circular that way. It's our, we do want to ramp this up, but we also recognize that it's highly unlikely that 100% of our products would come back to us in this way. And I think it's really important that no matter where they end up, that they are ultimately compostable and that they can go fiber to earth and then help support regeneration of the soil. And that's a different type of circularity, but that can only come about if all the inputs into our garments are pure and are biological. So so that's a separate stream, if you will, of our future development.
To add on to that, there's so much that I'm excited about and so much that we're doing. I mentioned our Global Change Awards, which 2020 was our 5th year, and we've had over 20,000 innovations submitted, and these are all about, like I said, changing the fashion industry. And we've actually, H&M doesn't retain any of the intellectual property for these, because really what we're looking at with these innovations is how are you changing the entire fashion industry, not just changing H&M. Because H&M, we're a big player, but when you compare it to the fashion industry at large, there's so much more impact that you can have. So in this way, we've been very fortunate that these early stage innovations through our accelerator program, for example, orange fiber, which is a cellulose fiber made from the waste from citrus juice production. So you're taking something that's a waste product, turning it into a material and a fabric. They went through our innovator program and then actually had a collection with Ferragamo before they ever had a collection then with H&M. Had this collection, they're able to scale, and then once they're able to grow their business, then they actually were part of our conscious collection. So it's really about supporting people. I think one of the things we really do is support people who are doing amazing things in sustainability. And that's something, we've had a garment collecting program since 2013, where in every one of our stores, you can take back any textile that you no longer want, and it will be either reworn, reused, or recycled. This is one way that we're impacting at scale. Last year, we collected 4.3 million pounds of textiles just in the US alone. And now with COVID, it's a little hard, but getting back to it, we have bigger and bigger goals and ambitions with this, but our goal ultimately is that the garment collecting program is just a step. It's not the end, it's just a step. And I think that's with every sustainability initiative that we have. It's always looking at it, here's the step, how can we be the best with the knowledge that we have and the best with the technology we have, and then okay, keep setting these goals. We have these ultimate goals that are sort of these bright shining stars. How are we getting there? Because I don't believe in sort of, incrementally better. I don't think it's enough to say, we're going to reduce our energy by 10% or whatever it is. It's about, no, where do we want to be so that we can, save the planet, basically.
Just to jump in really quickly, we sort of shy away from goal setting. We try to be principle first rather than goals. And some of that is my own personal experience, kind of having started out in things like human trafficking, climate, conflict violence against women. And just, I would see the UN or the US government making all these goals that just didn't really seem tied to legitimate principles. And so I think one of our core principles is that we really want to alleviate poverty, and so that every other aspect of our sustainability also has to be part of that. And we know that the textile industry in 2018 became the single largest industry contributor to forced labor and human trafficking. And so, especially with COVID, we know that the world's extreme poverty is going to double by the end of the year. And so I think that that sense of urgency is really what's leading our sustainability. And so our repairs program, that we're growing now employs refugees. We feel really strongly that both globally and domestically, we need to be part of diversity and inclusion. And that doesn't just start with, employment opportunities at your HQ. It really starts by creating economic opportunities for people who really need them the most. And so really combining those efforts and bringing all levels of society, whether it be in the communities of our supply or our HQ, into our program and trying to uplift communities in whatever way we can, whether it be through due diligence, design, or repair, and kind of combining the two, not just making goals that might actually not allow us to innovate or adapt to situations. And adaptability is really crucial, especially in the area of COVID. I think we've all learned that, and goals are going to be altered or have to be altered, I think, because of that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That was great. I loved the points you made about Cotopaxi. So I'm going to turn it back to Sabrina.
I'm going to ask one last question. We are over time, so if everyone could just give a very brief, maybe 30-second answer. For brands who are just starting out, just dipping their toe into sustainability, what is a word of advice that you would give on where to begin?
I'll be super quick. Design and supply chain.
Absolutely agree. Start at the beginning and then incorporate into every stage as you're developing your business, and also get the buy-in from the top and convince the people who control the money.
And I would say, even within design and supply chain, focus on a single product or a single fiber, because you can't do it all. And just start in one place, and you can layer up as you move along.
Yeah, start somewhere and know that it's a journey. I think that's all of us have mentioned that. is complicated, man. And the more you know, the more you're like, oh, I want to hide. This is so much more scary than I thought it was. Know that you're not alone. You can be doing this for amazing companies who have tons of resources. Everyone's starting at the beginning. I feel like that every day. We're just starting.
Well, Amy, Annie, and Abigail, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation, and thank you to Rebecca and Riley for co-moderating and Fashion Dex and LIM College. I will pass it back to Monica now.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sabrina. I would once again like to thank our sponsors. A big thank you to our sponsors, Eco Life Yarns, Kendor Textiles Limited, and the Accessories Council. If anyone is interested in becoming a sponsor, please feel free to reach out to myself, Monica, Juana, or Gladys. You can find our email and information at fashiondex.com. And speaking of fashiondex.com, if you go to the store, there's some amazing literature there. We also have the Sourcing Made Simple, an online access to the apparel industry online source book. So please sign up and join us for next week, week 8. We're going to be having a conversation on sustainable, on-demand, and taste-based production. We have some amazing speakers, Beth Espinette of Unspun, Chung Yu of MCM Enterprise, Jacqueline Jones of Clover and Cobbler, Ngozi Okara of Custom Collaborative, and David M. Prentice of On Point Manufacturing. Moderator will be Tara St. James, and co-moderator will be Bettina Hobson. And if you indulge me, week 9 will be a conversation on circularity and closed loop materials. Speakers will be Andrea Ferris of Intrinsic Textiles Group, Ashley Gill of Textile Exchange, George Maddox of Bella Lawrence, and Ryan W. Hunt of Algix and Bloom. The moderator will be Fatima Anwar of Ethical and Sustainable Sourcing, and co-moderator will be Austin Sierra of LIM College. That is all for today. I hope you had a great time. Thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful day and enjoy your weekend.